Persephone in the Greek mythology was the daughter of the king of the gods, Zeus, and the goddess of fertility, Demeter. And in the Greek mythology, she was kidnapped by the king of the underworld, Hades, to be his queen. And she was allowed to come back into the living world just part of the year. And I tell this story because it's important to understand who is Persephone. I mean, Persephone is not human, but she wants to feel human emotions. And she's like a vampire. Just instead of sucking blood, she sucks emotions and feelings from human beings. It's funny because in Italy we have a saying, l'abito non fa il monaco, which means the habit doesn't make the monk. In English you say, clothes don't make the man, right? Actually, for Persephone is the contrary. The habit makes the monk because the way how she dresses reveals a lot about who she is and about her personality. She's very elegant, very sophisticated, and actually Kim Barrett, the costume designer, did a really great job.
You know, the boys are very clear about, in the modern context, how they want them to look, but then I try and add in a feeling of something else underneath, kind of a broad subconscious base that, you know, we all have in common, which is our fairy tales and our myths and our histories generally, as, you know, people who grew up in a certain time.
She's an extremely sexy character, and her capriciousness like fitted into that kind of like, you know, uber sex, you know, vixen person.
What I like in the Merovingian is that it's a certain vulgarity. I love the fact that he goes for things that are a little too decorative, a little too flash. You know, he likes everything that shines. His house, the chateau, is really over the top. He's very much a Leo somehow, which I am too.
We're all programs in the Matrix, and we're working for Persephone's husband. We're kind of, a vampire-esque and werewolf subtext. So the bullet goes in here, bang, where that blood there is, right? You can see that blood, bang, and then there's a blood pack that can go bullet and like vomit on the back wall.
Well, the Keymaker, again, is kind of a fairy tale. We used to go in there and see all the keys on the roof and think it was a bit like Rumpelstiltskin, you know, spinning the straw into gold, because his room looked like a cave full of gold keys and was very kind of fairy tale-like.
Funnily enough, although they are not human, they go further into human excesses than the human characters in the story, who are in a way denying, or seems to be denying, emotion. They restrain their emotions. And the Merovingian and Persephone, they, on the contrary, they go all the way. And so you could say that they are more human. They appear more connected to their emotions. But it's quite interesting to think that the programs can be more human than human. I find that interesting.
We looked at all the big palaces in Europe. So it's over the top, where they had lots of money to spend and just gild everything and make everything shiny and glisten. We looked at a lot of marble floors, a lot of floors in Venice, and again, just throughout the classic palaces of Europe, designing a rubber floor so that the stunt guys can fall on that, but that it still looks like marble. So we're about to unroll the marble on top of the rubber.
The chateau was one of the more graceful fights, which sort of fitted the Merovingian in some way, given the nature of his character.
This fight that I witnessed, took almost 3 weeks to complete.
It was all choreographed on the floor. Then we did individual pieces on the floor up in the fight gym. Then they built the set. Then we had to rearrange the fight for the set, and then we had to rearrange the set for the fight. It went on for months.
Everything in this room is meant to break.
The designing of this was lots of references to old chateaux in Europe, looking at things like the Versailles Hall of Mirrors.
We tried to use period shapes to kind of have a old world, modern mix, and all stretch, a lot of stretch animal print. We wanted them nice and tight, and so you could see them moving in the air really well, because they do a lot of wire work.
There is a perfecting of oneself as an actor that goes through certain knowledges like movement, fighting, and you can tell that Keanu enjoys very much that process.
Old man, old movie kung fu man.
We just auditioned a bunch of stuntmen and got the best guys we could find with the weapons to go against Keanu. Dave Leach, Usan Elam, Chen Hu, Marcus Young, and Brad Martin. And if you look up into our rigging up here, we've got about 33 wires up there for approximately 27 different wire gags, all within this one scene.
It's like theater. You have the people in the light doing the magic, and you have the people in the darkness without whom it is impossible to achieve.
No comment, no comment.
This part is more like a more traditional Chinese style, more fly, which is the Blooders one, the one that a lot of people fly in air.
In fact, if you looked up into the ceiling, it was just like a patchwork quilt of wires running all over the roof.
即係我接到呢場戲之後咧，我覺得以 Keanu 嚟打兵器咧，打一樣嘢我覺得係唔夠痛快，即係唔夠變化嘅，所以我設計佢好多變化，多打幾樣嘢，即係不斷咁樣換兵器啊，不斷咁，譬如開始打西打甩咗又換支棍棍甩咗換把短劍換長劍換到雙棍打，即係我覺得個層次一路咁變化落去咧，就個動作兵器嘅動作個感覺唔會好悶，即係一路有變化，又去睇又去睇，一路轉變兵器，覺得觀眾睇落覺得會新鮮啦，即係我自己嘅構想係咁去嘅。
It's good just to do a bunch of fighting in camera, and it's there is also like a sort of boyish charm, like impaling people or smashing them through a statue or throwing them down the stairs or pinning them to a wall or hitting them over the head with a shield.
If I had imagined where he would be reigning, I would have completely agreed with the places that I have found.
So this is a set where there's a lot more weapons. It's going back to that idea of there being warriors, Merovingian. So it's filled with weapons that are from every country of every era. That's the idea that we're trying to push right through the chateau.
We have a great ability to be able to disappear whenever you want. We kind of like atomize our bodies so we can pass through solid objects. We can go through the floor. We can, you know, if someone tries to shoot us, we just go, gone. You can't touch us. So we're kind of impregnable, really.
I mean, you can shoot somebody from any distance, but to come up and actually open them.
Yeah. I mean, that's really, I mean, you always epitomize death in the old sort of gangster times with these switchblades, and that's the way everyone decided to hurt people. And it's I think in the way the brothers envisioned that, this just downright dirty, nasty kind of attacking.
Yeah.
If we could, we'd make them bleed instead of shoot them with bullets.
Yeah. But there's a sense of skill element there as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we do it with style. It's a fascinating concept, and it's a real ability that shows the Matrix for what it is and how it can be abused by these rogue programs.
Phase that stuff. Forget Hugo and his pal with his, we can phase.
Bullet time's old time, we done that years ago.
Yeah, phasing's in. Phasing's the new stage.
Phasing's the new thing.
The actual chateau that we're filming at for the front is in the Loire Valley, and it doesn't really have a nice back door, so we had to create our own. They've taped on grout lines, and then they've got a slurry of plaster which they've pushed across, and then probably another coat so that we can try and get this texture into it. And they've pulled off the tape and then got in there with extra bits to try and make it look like it's much more aged.
Well, I mean, the freeway scene takes place in the Matrix. So already it's not a conventional car chase because you are dealing with a system that is possible to alter. So within the car chase, people can change inside cars. People can do things they've never done before, that you've never seen before.
In the freeway chase sequence with the twins, we went with an H&K UMP. We put a sight rail on top of it here, and then we've taken an M203 grenade launcher and put on to the front of the weapon. Runs extremely well. It's a fantastic weapon.
It's like 700 rounds a minute, and it's got a flame that shoots out of it that far at the front. It's just amazing to use that.
The Neb is a four-man crew, yeah, and which is why I think Link must be a super, super smart guy, because in the first one, they had 7 other people there. They had all these other people to do all these jobs while some people were jacked in. Well, now, 3 of my crew, they're jacked in, and then it's me. So, so I'm monitoring the Matrix. I must be maintaining the ship, and like he must be all over the place. You don't get to see anything, but I get to pretend that really I'm that smart.
We had an incredibly talented stunt coordinator on this, R.A. Rondell. He was able to craft a very complicated car chase and bike chase.
It was nice to get in there in the beginning to see where they were going with it and try and get in their head a little bit about what they wanted to see. And then start working with something that was kind of new for me, was the pre-visualization. And actually get to see what it looks like before you went out to shoot.
We have a number of sequences on the freeway that are the agent takeovers, and the reference was that kind of distortion, that Francis Bacon distortion, and it's a violent and aggressive takeover. It's not meant to be pleasant, so we've had to scan all the characters so we can animate from one head to the other.
The whole freeway was pretty much run by the stunt department to an extent. We came up with a realistic pattern of 50 miles an hour on the background traffic. and anywhere from 60 to 70 miles an hour in the chase vehicle, so they're always overtaking the traffic. It's a teamwork between the stunt department, the precision drivers, and the background players that are here.
Well, we wasted a lot of the public, which is great, you know. I mean, I spent a lot of time getting through a lot of rounds with my machine gun.
They gave us a bunch of cars, and then the effects department put a bunch of cages in them and whatnot, and the idea was to go out there and wreck as much as we could before we went home.
And you realize that it's what movie making is all about, that you actually have the ability to put all these people together and put them in a location and get all these cars and all these cameras, and you can make all this happen and then add to it the visual effects. It is just staggering.
We've done a lot of investigation into jellyfish, the way you can see through parts of them, how the light affects them, and the edges you get. It's such an amazingly subtle thing, and it's quite difficult to reproduce.
And the scene that we're doing was quite difficult because, you know, you got these two big guys, and we're in a teeny little car, and I'm like trying to kick him while I'm sitting in the back seat, and there's knives flashing around and the car screaming everywhere. I mean, the whole freeway thing for me was just amazing.
Being able to pull off what we called Event 3 was a big deal for me. 2 cannon rolls in it, 2 dragging pipe ramps, 2 T-bones, and a jackknifing truck, all in the same 250 feet of the freeway, all at 60 miles an hour.
You see all these cars in the air, and behind you, that's all those cars are in the air. There are cars dragging pipe ramps, so there are guys driving up and flipping in the air, really in the movie happening.
Cars at 300 frames a second are flying up in the air, and I realized they're doing the same thing with 60 cars that they do with the fights and everything else. It is choreographed. It was just beautiful stuff.
Sort of cars going like this in the background.
I mean, there are moments in this freeway where you just don't breathe. I mean, you just are like so. You hold your breath, and then there's a moment where it's a design moment where you kind of have a release, and you know you can breathe, and then all of a sudden it starts up again.
I went to motion picture driving school twice, and I have a diploma, and I framed it and I put it on my wall because that was fun. And I'm glad that I went, and I really appreciated the skills that I learned when it came down to shooting days, because I was really able to do some really cool stuff and felt confident, and had, you know, Lawrence in the car with me and Randall in the car with me, both completely trusting of my ability.
Carrie Ann can drive her ass off. I mean, you know, within like 2 hours, she was whipping the car around like she'd been doing it all her life. It was really exciting.
Her driving ability was phenomenal. I had to take a car where I had a camera in it and run up alongside her at 50, 60 miles an hour and slam into the side of her and rub fenders with her down the freeway and stuff. She hung right in there.
That was pretty awesome. One of my favorite things that I did in the film, and I got in one take, which was very exciting for me, was my sliding 90 into camera. It's all about brake and handbrake and sliding and hitting your mark and starting the turn at the right point.
I never dreamed that in my latter years I would be doing something like that. It was fantastic. It was fantastic to work with Carrie Ann. I felt like a little kid having a big, huge adventure.
This was the original Viz. The world is rotating. The twins are being pushed up by the wake of the explosion.
This is the element for the kind of pull-up part of the shot.
And then eventually we ended up with live-action plate of the roads. Then we did pyro plates, and we did blue screen stunts of twins, which we are manipulating a little bit.
We designed something on the computer that was amazing. And then all of a sudden, now you got to suck it up and you got to make it happen for real on camera, and not just once. Over and over again, they expect it, they want to see it, but that's not the angle you showed us on the previs. we pulled it off, I feel. I mean, the motorcycle rig with Debbie Evans, Dublin Trinity, Carrie Ann on that was amazing.
The motorcycle descender rig was actually, it's hydraulically operated with a motion control system. So once we had the move programmed in, it was repeatable. And it sort of looked like a square rigger sailing ship.
I have a major fear of the motorbike. And it was very challenging for me to get on the bike. My biggest fear about it was, I guess, dying.
Carrie Ann basically had some motorcycle background from her childhood, but I taught her how to ride again.
Start off with a tiny little bike, master my tiny little bike, get on a little bigger bike. If it wasn't for RA, I would never have been able to get on the motorcycle and do that. Him and my stunt double, Deb.
We had this incredible stunt woman named Deb, who we literally drove against the traffic.
They needed a girl who could ride one of the Ducati 996s really well, and that would be what I'm known for.
She's a 3-time national trials bike champion. I've worked with her for over 25 years in cars, motorcycles, whatever. She's by far the best there is.
Also, that was like part of a visual effects sequence where we wanted to have some, close calls with trucks and cars that would come too close, and some very complicated virtual camera moves where the camera would actually go underneath the truck. We had some cars coming at her, and then we also had some markers on the ground which would represent down the freeway where certain cars would be at a certain time. So that was all mapped out on pre-visualization. Then RA and Deb and all the stunt drivers got out there and they practiced with her driving against the traffic.
The safety path that is allowed would be filled with additional virtual cars and thusly look almost, completely impossible.
It's the thing about Morpheus that's really confronting, is that when you look in his eyes, you only get to see yours when the mask is on. So the thing about taking them off for me is that when it gets really hairy inside the Matrix, when he's not sure whether or not he's gonna get out or not, then, the armor doesn't help. It doesn't, that's when the armor's gotta come off and you gotta fight with what's inside of you as opposed to what's outside of you. In the first movie, Morpheus says, everyone who has fought an agent has died. And so, here in this moment on the truck top, knowing that he's fighting agents who have been upgraded, he's gonna stand and fight to protect the Keymaker. That's one of the reasons why it's really exciting, because Morpheus is incredibly vulnerable.
Obviously, you can't shoot a kung fu fight on top of a truck going down a freeway at 60 miles an hour, so we decided to shoot it inside, simulate the travel.
Isn't this unbelievable? Look at this. This truck top is going to move through these hydraulics, which makes it really difficult for us because the whole top moves.
In rehearsal, it's cool because the truck's not moving. Then they turn on the hydraulics, man. They're blowing air, and you're trying to hit your mark after you're up in the air, and there are guys who are controlling you being in the air, and then you try to make the move, and you've got 15 extra pounds on you.
Everything outside of the freeway walls is actually CG, but then stuff in the distance is stuff that I painted. I did a painting of the megacity, which we keep seeing in the distance.
One of the shining moments for me personally in terms of the performance as Morpheus is the bit where the sword actually gets used. I will always have great memories of that. A samurai sword is not that difficult a weapon to wield. I wouldn't, dare think that I could master it, but I did find that it did require a particular kind of strength in the forearm area that I certainly had to develop.
We were really lucky in that we were able in the end to build the set,
because we were able to get exactly what we wanted, which was kind of like this corridor of death almost. Conceptually, it was fantastic, even after all of those things, because it enabled us to have exactly the look we wanted.
It's a combination of the old-fashioned wire work that comes out of Hong Kong and this new technology that Larry and Andy and John have sort of created together. It's a combination of those things, plus our effort as actors. It builds, it's so well crafted, it's so well constructed as a piece of entertainment, as a piece of action. I think the most impressive thing to me was what they were able to do with the trucks.
We did slide some for real on the freeway. This particular rigs were wheels that turned on the trailer that initiated to go. Smoke machines that poured smoke out the sides, gave you the sense of it, and a lot of some of the editorial that went with it makes it work.
It all leads up to the big one, and this was one of the shots where they wanted to take bullet time one step further, and they knew they couldn't shoot this, so they knew it was going to be a virtual shot, I think, from the beginning.
You can see Mega City in the background throughout the freeway chase, but this is the only shot where you actually fly outside of the freeway walls and just completely see everything that is out there.
These trucks ripple and blend with each other, and the fire comes out in a way that if we were just going for real, wouldn't be nearly as interesting as the kinds of things we get to do in here.
This car chase, the boys put it in a non-reality world. So you see something that you can't believe you're seeing. And I think that's the most impressive thing about it.
The one thing that Link does do, which I think is really interesting, and that his name is Link, is he sort of is an interesting link between the audience and the movie. In the movie, a lot of things are happening and nobody seems to be paying attention, like Neo's flying through the air, and it's like, just another day at the office, except for Link, who's like, oh my God, which is what you might, what the audience might see. You actually he gets to be the audience member in the movie.
We established about 15,000 sentinels at any one time. Well, that's a pretty phenomenal number of creatures to sort of keep track of, animate, render, light, make look like every one of them is doing the right thing.
It's just a memory hog in terms of rendering.
What I loved about that shot was also its introduction to the diggers, and in the shot you can see all the different stages of the diggers' functionality.
It was very, very powerful, the way that the events of September 11th informed that scene.
That was a tough time because I didn't want to show up. I didn't want to be an actor and be in a movie. Who cared? That's what it felt like.
We went right into shooting the scene in the Lafayette Hotel where Morpheus gives the speech about this is a war, we are soldiers, death can come for us at any time, in any place. Randall Duck Kim, who plays the keymaker, starts that scene, laying out for us the plan. And he set a tone because he was in New York on September 11th.
I think what has occurred in the world has given this film a larger context, and I think everybody senses that. And it all struck us, right at that. Morpheus has a speech about war, and it just had an extra level of real meaning.
It was much closer. The words that were written, it wasn't just a story anymore.
There clearly are strong parallels between the Christ Messiah and Neo. He's a bit reluctant, of course, as the Christ probably was. Certainly, as many of the other prophets and scriptures have been, you know, who is it that's going to take up this cause? And the person's sort of really saying, no, I don't want it to be me, because it's a tremendous burden. And I think that that's something that Keanu Reeves really captured quite well.
It's never about the individual. It's never about the person. The idea of a person moving through this kind of journey to achieve something, yes, but the individual, it's not about that. It's about the ideas.
My first day of acting, they stole my Those are my pants. You knew they were up there, didn't you? We have 4 cameras. Where do they want to go? And I'll point out to Buzz they have 4 cameras, and they'll go, why? This is the shot we want, right? This is the shot right here.
They're basically shooting what's in the film. There's no kind of extemporaneous camera angle. They just know what they want to see, and they both need to be there to see it. And in order to perform it, you have to do it. You know, we want to see it. We want to see it. And I think that's comes across very strongly in their storytelling and in their cinema. And there's kind of an interesting thing, because there's the source, which will lead you to the source. I'm thinking that the keymaker will lead me to the source, but it's not the source. It's kind of a MacGuffin of sorts. And underneath that is the vision of Trinity coming into the Matrix and dying. Because I know that I have this choice to make eventually.
Well, Niobe has no faith. She believes in nothing but herself. I feel like that's why she feels so isolated, why she's so scared. The only thing that she's really connected to is her heart as a soldier. She knows what she has to do as far as that's concerned, and she's good at it. And I feel like she's extremely burdened because she feels like the only person she can depend on is herself. She is all she's got.
Morpheus is probably the character that I will be remembered for. And I've made my peace with that. It was very, very strange to see how people were affected by the character when the first film came out. It was really interesting. And it was a little overwhelming for me. I wasn't really prepared to be sort of in a hit movie, because I hadn't really been in anything that has been as commercially successful as The Matrix. Morpheus is a character that's, you know, I'm largely responsible for creating in a way, and he's somebody that I really, really dig. And if I was ever in a fight, I'd want him to be with me.
The keyboards and the screens were a real great tool to have because they give you something to do. They give the actor something to really work out, and and I have to work out sort of different programs as I'm doing things, or a sequence of things that go on. And I didn't have to suspend my imagination so much because I really had everything right there, working for me.
There's so many qualities about Trinity that I am. And then there's other things that, if I had to, I would, fight, for what I believe in. And I would, if I had to, I'd jump on a motorcycle and I'd, save, your life if I had to. And Trinity has to. So there we go. There's the difference. I don't have to. I have to because of the movie. But in my own personal life, I don't have to do those things. So I prefer reading or going for a nice walk with my dogs. So there you go. There's the difference. But, at the same time, I'm a serious, I'm pretty hardcore too, in a whole nother way. Right. And if I had to, fight for something that I believed in, or I would.
We're dealing with many, many copies of Hugo's character, Agent Smith, and in order to reproduce him many, many times, we're going to shoot multiple passes that then later get combined together into a single vision of multiple Agent Smiths. It's such a confined space that any fighting or jostling that happens cannot really be done by repeating takes. We have to have people in there occupying those positions and pushing each other around and fighting, and later replace the heads.
We're preparing for a scene in the rerouting facility computer room where the Vigilant crew come in and try and hack the main system. And so, we not only have to set up the environment that they're in, but, on their screens, the interface and what actually happens on their machines as they're trying to hack this mainframe system. So, there's a fair bit of research that goes into all of this. We visited a power station and got some reference images, just the kind of stuff you'd expect to see in one of these places, close-ups of the various screens. And it's always great to have design based on a sense of realism.
Oh, I love Randall. He's one of those actors that, really loves what he does from a pure place of joy and artistry.
Well, every time I've had to do it, that scene, you meditate on mortality, not only as a character, but as a human being. The question about this one is, how does an old program die? What makes it different than a human dying?
Well, originally I went for a different part. I was told they wanted somebody to play, I don't know who it was a counsellor, I think. I suddenly got a different script and was asked to read for this completely other part, which completely bamboozled me because, of course, I hadn't read the whole script. I only read the scenes that I was in, and I thought, what the hell is this? The father of the Matrix, he says, God/devil. And I thought, wow, this is good. Yeah, I can do that. I can do my cheap Orson Welles imitation and get paid for it.
It is a place that we've actually seen once before in the first movie, but only a little glimpse of it. There's a shot of Neo where Neo gets interrogated. The beginning of the scene starts with us pushing through a bank of monitors. So where we're at is the place where those monitors are.
That was a complicated scene which was completely shot blue screen. And then he has a bunch of monitors all around him, like hundreds and hundreds of monitors, which show all the other Neos that have come before Neo that up until this point he doesn't know about.
The whole belief system of being the one is shattered. Because I'm not the one, I'm the sixth one. So I learned that I don't know as much as I thought I did.
The images inside the monitors, of course, we're going to shoot, but they'll be shot in a fairly unique way so that we can do tricks of perspective on the Neos in the monitors. Some basic camera feedback loops where we can travel from the center of the environment here through monitors back into the environment and out again if we choose.
I think an agent is, it's such a trademark of the Matrix, right? And I watched the first one a lot and studied how these guys move, and also Andy and Larry, obviously their input.
The assignments we had for littering the screens in the background really had to do with the folly of man. We just figured it was a short history of recorded images, so we took from newsreel, World War I or II, through contemporary time, the sort of leaders and events that the audience that was watching The Matrix would be familiar with. We had leaders of all different sorts, not necessarily always evil, just those that seemed to have an effect in world order through the 20th century. And it was just a hyper-informational delivery that really didn't matter if you really saw everything. It was really just about the architect's access to an infinity of information related to Neo's, consciousness of who he was. First was the folly of man, and then it became Neo's folly and his preoccupation with Trinity and saving her, and the folly of an unreal life, a constructed life that he never led, and the fact that every moment of his life was a construction of the architect or the machinery of the Matrix. And so he was demonstrating, I suppose, to Neo that it was all an elaborate fabrication to break his will, I suppose.
It's malevolent not in a moral sense. It's malevolent in a, oh, well, this formula doesn't work, let's scrub it out and try something else. It's mathematical malevolence. But I remember on the first day of shooting, Larry came over and said, Helmut, you must remember, this guy is a sentient. He's aware of morality, but he chooses to ignore it at this particular time. It was hell. It was hell. Mainly because I sort of spoke virtually non-stop. And Keanu every now and then would say a reaction, but I had to kind of carry the scene in terms of the dialogue. So I had to learn it parrot fashion and yet still make sense of it. I mean, I expected the center of the matrix to be a mathematical formula, some sort of mathematical construct, not humanized. I was very surprised that it turned out to be a person. And in fact, it was Keanu who sort of translated for me what the brothers were trying to say, for which I will remain eternally grateful. And it's a mental thing as well, which was the really difficult one. I kind of found finally the key was to meditate, to kind of just wipe everything clean and just imagine that I was like a blank blackboard. And then it made sense. Until I got rid of everything, it was very, very difficult.
And then there I'm given, you know, the choice of humanity or Trinity. It's funny that Neo just goes for Trinity.
Neo's representing this fundamental volition, choice, decision, purpose, mission, fighting against all odds, but he's now confronted with the embodiment of the determinism and the nihilism of the architect. Having to make that choice with love on the one hand, the alternative on the other, though, man, this is, it's rich, it's rich.
The responsibility of a life. It's an escalation of that same choice, of my actions having impact on the life or death of other people. But it's that whole thing of choice and that whole thing of, you know, I don't believe everything I hear. And I don't think that what everyone says to me, Neo, is the truth, or it has to be the truth.
This is a breakaway wall, so Trinity's stunt actor gets thrown completely through this wall and ends up in the interior office. There's a lot of special effects bullet hits that are set into the desk and various bits of furniture around the room.
Trinity fall sequence is a very difficult sequence. It has to be broken up into a series of very kind of complex shots that we shoot parts of, that it's done on, you know, big long tracks. It's very complicated visual effects.
Flaming Tsunami was one of our sort of defining anime-esque action beats. I believe the shot represents more of an emotional state of mind inside Neo than it does any attempt by the Matrix trying to destroy Neo. This here was cast off of Carrie-Anne and allows her to be in the same posture every time.
It was one of the hardest things I've ever done as an actor because between action and cut, which is like action, cut, I have to start off intense Trinity girl to being shot feeling that, and before you know it, like I'm just on intense girl, it's cut, you know?
The problem with doing effects in general is that there is this sort of
lack of respect.
and also the human factor.
Because Trinity doesn't really get, you know, too roughed up, you know, the brothers thought that she should because she's just been beaten up, and so I got to have messy hair and some cuts, and it's amazing what how much that gave my performance so much more. It was great. I was very, very, very happy.
Carrie Ann and I would speak and just really with our enthusiasm for, you know, what we were getting to do, and that that what we try to do resonates, and that, you know, the romance and the fighting and the ideas, and if anything, it inspired. There's a lot of architecture in the work, not only in the acting, but in the structures and in the storytelling, in the cinema. But there is an ambition to entertain in a popular manner, with some ideas and things that we all think about and feel about and experience. The quest for truth, the quest for understanding our lives, the sacrifices we make, the sacrifices we're asked, the works that we can produce, you know? So it's all in there, I feel.
I love Morpheus's journey and the purity of his desire to continue on, and then his absolute disappointment and grief at the idea that it might not be true.
Morpheus never changes in this movie. Everything around him does.
You know, what is Morpheus now? What is the aspect of the believer who's not believed from other characters?
We're standing in the sewer set, and what's just happened, we're at the end of Reloaded. Nebuchadnezzar is down that way some way, and a tow bomb has been thrown by the Sentinels and it's flying down there. And so our heroes, Neo and Morpheus and Trinity and Link, have to run from the ship, escape, and they're making their way up through the sewer here. So this is kind of like at the very bottom of the S-bend. So if you imagine the S-bend in your bathroom down the bottom where all the rings and the crap ends up, this is it. You've got to think you're in a big tunnel that is made of pipes, and it's like 30 stories high. It's a difficult space to work in because you need the ground to be undulating, so it's not, you can't just put a dolly on the ground and work. And you need to dress the pieces to shot so it looks busy and, you know, threatening and dangerous. And architecturally, in certain shots there is quite a sense of architecture here, the sense of it all kind of rising up into what is in fact a very long tunnel down there, and a very high tunnel.
not to give the movie magic away, but it's the same ship, you know, that Owen very ingeniously turns around to make it look something completely different each time. He's done a pretty amazing job too.
You know, we've used sets 3 or 4 times. We regularly use sets twice. The Nebuchadnezzar, the Majolna, and the Vigilant were all the same floor base with the same chair mechanisms, but with different cores and different wall groups.
It's a cliffhanger, which was one of the things about it that I really, really dug when I read the script. I was like, wow, this is really interesting, sort of at this particular time in our industry to see this kind of throwback, but that's done in a thoroughly modern kind of way, is really, it's refreshing in a way, you know?
The first Matrix was so beautiful and hard and full of so much.
After the movie came out in '99, there were, you know, elective classes at university level, man, where people are actually studying the mythology that's contained within the first scripts.
It really affected people. People really got into that world. The brothers made a movie that was unlike other movies, yet at the same time exhibited their love of all of the other movies that they like. And they created a world, and people entered that world and appreciated them for it.
And what they have managed to do, which is incredible, is to condense all that history of the human drama and the human philosophy throughout the ages. It's extraordinary. That's why they have that fascination for the mythical names. So there's food for thought, and I'm not surprised that people are studying that at university. I mean, I think that it is extremely dense, and to be taken at many, many levels.
I was afraid coming around again for the second and third that it couldn't compare or that it wouldn't compare, and it's just been even more special and more difficult and more beautiful.
I loved Reloaded. Reloaded was just like popcorn. It was just so dense.
It's uncanny how they really fit so much into this. And, you know, it's 2 hours and 10 minutes, which is about the same length as the other one, and it just is so incredible how much information is packed into those 2 hours and 10 minutes.
It's really a wonderful sort of piece of entertainment with all the beautiful mythology and all the wonderful, like, philosophy kind of layered into it.
I think that the action is like the meat that a thief uses, that a burglar uses to get into the house, while the real philosophy and the philosophical thoughts are actually doing their work underneath. And I think that they've woven that together seamlessly and quite effectively.
In order for them to have constructed this movie, I mean, I can't even imagine the tons and tons and tons of books that they've had to read to actually put this story together in the way that they have, because it's got to be at least 500 layers to this thing. It's like an onion. You know what I mean? Once you peel one layer off, here's another one.
I mean, I thought in this script form, they had really made them, if possible, more dense and more entertaining.
It's so interesting and it's so complex, and you really learn about this universe that the Wachowski brothers invented.
Because they put what they wanted, you got this kung fu science fiction, philosophical action love movie that exactly mirrors what their interests are.
It's got it all. It's got all things for all. If you're an action freak, you'll have all the action you want. If you really want to see a really powerful love story, it's there. If you're interested in the philosophy or the theories behind it, it's there. If the character development is there, I mean, the science fiction is there. It's all there, and it's all these different things for all different people. And I really think that when you sit down and watch this movie, it really will affect you, and it will make you think about so many things. I think that's the best thing about it.
Their ambition to raise the bar for action movies, their desire to create a film that was an action film that was not just driven by the action, but was also story-driven, that was driven by ideas, that incorporated great mythologies and great philosophies. Those kind of things are just, it's absolutely rare.
Just by what I've had a chance to participate in, and the brothers in what they want to realize, the Matrix vision that they have. It's been hard, but it's also been, but that's what makes it really good, rolling up the sleeves and trying to realize this dream.